Over the past weekend, Final Fantasy XVI got another major update on the long-awaited DLC, The Rising Tide, releasing in just a couple weeks from now on April 18th. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy XVI, then there is a bunch of news regarding The Rising Tide as a whole. From its 10-hour runtime of finding out about Leviathan and its people, to new optional content and extremely needed updates, there is a lot of information about just how much The Rising Tide will contain. But of course, before we get into it, if you enjoy the content here, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe for anything JRPG related. So starting off, we get a brand new trailer for The Rising Tide that gives us more of a glimpse of Mysidia, and the premise of what the story will be about. In the beginning of the trailer, it's mentioned that a child was sacrificed as a vessel for Leviathan, so that the rest of their people could live in peace. And so following that, Clive and company will receive a letter in the hideaway asking them to travel to the land of Mysidia. What I find interesting is that this new area is actually the northern region where Jill is from, with even Yoshi P saying that Jill will indeed have much more of a focus this time around. Within the trailer, you can even hear what seems to be Jill mentioning Shiva calling out to them. So perhaps this time around, we could be exploring more into what it meant for Jill to be connected to Shiva. Yoshi P also stressed that if you love Jill, this is a story you don't want to miss. For those who also wanted more to do in an exploration, it has been confirmed that a form of treasure hunts will be incorporated into the game, where you'll need to use the touchpad in order to discover items around the map. How deep this feature will go will have to be seen, but it's great to see that there is something to do within these areas besides, simply looking at them. The director for these two DLC, Takeo Kujiraoka, says that although the DLC is not added after the ending of the main story, it is a story that gives you a sense of hope, that even if the crystals disappear from Valisthea, people will definitely be able to recover. But that's not all, as Yoshi P, Takai, and Kujiraoka add on that after completing both DLC, players will unlock an epilogue quest that may give you the most hope yet. And with translations by Audrey, they explain that further by saying, quote, "I can't reveal the exact details yet, but we have prepared a comprehensive epilogue quest that unlocks after clearing both DLCs as an expression of gratitude to the fans." Yoshi P adds on that the epilogue connects to all Clive has done thus far in the story taking place in the world of FF16. It is a conclusion of sorts, with Kujiraoka saying that perhaps this is something in the DLC that may give you the most hope. By playing this quest, its contents will allow you to feel that this world is safe after all. And I do think they are right in addressing this, because I do know that a lot of people wanted a more definitive ending to the story, while it may not touch the ambiguity of the ending, which I think is totally fine. I do think that giving us a quest that shows us all of the good Clive and gang has done all around the world, to show us the positive impact they've had in Valisthea and its people, I think is a great alternative if they aren't going to touch the ending. And I'll be very clear, I think the ending of FF16 was great. It brought the themes of the game together very nicely. Of course, it's not the happiest of endings, and not everyone is going to love ambiguous endings, but I personally believe it's a great storytelling tool to use, especially when done right. You see it with FF7 OG, you see it with FF10, and even FF15. These endings always leave you with the question of, well, what really happened? And FF16's ambiguous ending, in my opinion, was handled very well. But again, it does sound like they're adding more of a definitive conclusion to the world and characters as a whole for those who want it, even if it doesn't touch the actual ending, which I am fine with either way. But this next section is kind of interesting. As we know, Yoshi P said numerous times they don't want to change the ending of Final Fantasy XVI. However, at the end of this trailer, we get a glimpse of what seems to be a winged Clive descending down before cutting off. And anyone familiar with the lore of Final Fantasy XVI knows that this could very well be the true form of Logos that Ultima wanted. Now, I know people are going to point out that the room Clive is in is a similar room to the new Kairos mode, so maybe this is just a secret Clive boss. But I actually believe that this may be an extra section within the last mission of Final Fantasy XVI scene where you fly to Origin. Even Yoshi P himself was reluctant on talking about this winged Clive, as it would obviously be big spoilers. And I don't think this version of Clive is a secret boss in Kairos mode, because if it was, why would they even bother showing this winged Clive if it was a secret boss fight? No, I truly believe that this part in the trailer is either a very late scene within the Rising Tide, or a newly added section within Origin after Clive has gained all the icons. I think it's also worth mentioning that the skies of Mysidia will be unaffected by the recent actions of Ultima during this DLC, as even Yoshi P and Kujiraoka talked about how tired they got with the purple Primogenesis sky near the end, and I think we all know where they're coming from. Because while I understand what they were going for in trying to depict a world ending, it did get pretty old after a certain point, especially if you were someone doing all the side quests. The purple sky actively took away from how good the game looked and instead made everything look dull, which I guess in a way was the point. But when you look back at how beautiful the environments were, and really just the game in general, I mean it when I say that the graphic fidelity is the best I've seen out of any Final Fantasy thus far. And it would seem like this 10-hour long DLC will bring back that vibrance I so deeply missed from the earlier parts of the game. But we aren't finished yet, as the Rising Tide introduces a new endgame mode called Kairos Gate. This is an optional roguelike mode where you'll customize and upgrade Clive's abilities on a clean slate, all while fighting through 20 stages. For those who wanted more to do than just hunts and side quests, this is definitely something you'll want to do, as it's said to be very challenging, especially on Final Fantasy mode and definitely on Ultimaniac mode. One thing to mention here is that Final Fantasy mode will have a secret boss for those who clear every stage with an S rank. And when it comes to rewards, the good news is that they are all exclusive to Kairos Gate. One notable reward that players should definitely strive for are all 8 elemental weapons achieved through completing it, and an extra elemental weapon earned by clearing Kairos Gate on Final Fantasy mode. So I'll be very interested to see just how crazy Kairos Gate is when it eventually releases. I do want to quickly go over the patch details revealed here, as with this free update for the base game comes many improvements and quality of life changes. First off, when you finish a quest, you now have the option to teleport back to the quest giver immediately. And I'm honestly surprised this wasn't a feature back when the game first released, with the amount of times you're going back and forth. But better late than never. Also, on top of that, quest icons are now distinguishable in their importance. So say the quest is for an item or materials, or for an important character of interest. Those are now appropriately marked as such. And yeah, this is definitely something that will save a lot of time with deciding what side quests are worth doing, and which ones should be skipped entirely, so awesome stuff. Now these are the updates that really opened my eyes. The fact that you could now add loadouts for your icons is a godsend. Literally, the amount of times I would need to just switch things in and out and then be very upset that I couldn't just save those presets was very annoying. So for those who are wanting presets for their icons, there you go. And moving down from that, the ability to freely customize your controller layout without presets is now being added. But there is some bad news, however, because as of this video's recording, it has been confirmed that performance mode, and I quote, will only be a little better, but can't promise 60 FPS with giant fields and tons of objects, which is definitely a bummer for sure. So for those waiting on a patch to performance, it looks like the PS5 version still won't be able to hold a solid 60 FPS. But to be honest, I think we all saw this coming. Aside from combat that is always locked at 60 FPS, the game would always hover around the 40 to 50 FPS range in exploration. So hopefully performance will be a lot better come the PC version. But with that said, most of the changes here are extremely useful and needed updates all around. And this free patch for the base game will release with the DLC on April 18th. Honestly, with the rising tide, it looks like Final Fantasy XVI will be elevated even higher than it was before. With the abundance of new content, there really isn't much I can complain about at the moment. One thing that can be said though is that a lot of the problems of Final Fantasy XVI definitely seem to be getting addressed. When it comes to difficulty, especially in Leviathan, or the side content, endgame content, and even just seeing more of our characters. The devs are definitely not blind to our complaints. And while some problems may not have been addressed, like giving us a new difficulty entirely, or giving us true 60 FPS, it still seems like content-wise, Final Fantasy XVI is in a great place. As not only do we have the DLC to look forward to, but we also have a PC version coming very soon. So tell me, what do you think of the rising tide? How do you feel about all the new content revealed for this DLC? And do you believe that the rising tide will in fact change the ending in some way? I guess we'll all have to wait and see come next month on April 18th.